All right, it looks like it's 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessica Bean, and I am the Assistant Director for the Office of Public Participation at the State Water Resources Control Board. I would like to thank each of you for joining the second part of our first Safer Advisory Group meeting of 2021. Let's see. Excuse me, there we go. I'd like to go over some meeting logistics before we begin. This meeting is being webcast publicly in both English and Spanish at video.calepa.ca.gov. We are also recording today's meeting and will post it on our website for anyone who may not have been able to join us today. We have note takers capturing the main points of today's meeting, and we'll send out the notes to advisory group members within the next 3 weeks. The Water Board's mission is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources for the benefit of present and future generations. That's why we want to begin this meeting by acknowledging the groups who have and who continue to experience economic, environmental, and social disadvantages as a result of historical marginalization and whose daily lives are impacted by racism and injustices. As a reminder, our work here today should strengthen the empowerment of Indigenous and community voices as we work together to provide clean, safe, and affordable water to all Californians. For our meeting today, I'd like to review some guidelines. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. We ask that advisory group members please try and join by video if possible. We know that's not always something you can do. We have a few scheduled breaks, but please remember to take breaks as you need them. For questions, comments, or other technical or language assistance issues during the meeting, please email safer@waterboards.ca.gov. And as a reminder, we have oral interpreters providing simultaneous interpretation through Zoom in Spanish. Please remember to speak slowly to ensure the interpreters can capture today's important conversation. If you would like to listen in Spanish or toggle between channels, please navigate to the bottom of your screen and find a small globe. Clicking this globe will show all available audio channels. All right. So in our last advisory group meeting, we discussed the results of the drinking water needs assessment and a little bit about the fund expenditure plan. So we decided to break up the first advisory group meeting into 2 separate sessions since there was a lot of information that needed to be covered in our first session. The goal of the first meeting was to provide a better understanding of how many communities in California are failing to provide safe drinking water or are at risk of providing safe drinking water. So the goals for today's meeting are to recap the needs assessment and fund expenditure plan, which is often referred to as the FEP. We also plan to have a group discussion to obtain feedback from advisory group members on the needs assessment and fund expenditure plan. And then we want to set up steps for the Safer Advisory Group meeting number 2, which will be held on June 10th of this year. So after our last meeting, you should have received the full needs assessment report along with a shorter summary report, which is available in both English and Spanish. We have that available on the advisory group website. We're also hoping that you had an opportunity to review this report in greater depth. This way we can discuss the documents in more detail and answer any questions you may have. So today I'd like to tell you what we're going to be doing. We will do a little recap of the needs assessment since it has been a little while since we discussed it. We'll also do a recap of the fund expenditure plan. After that, we will go into breakout groups. We will also have a large group discussion. And then we will also have time for our public comment section. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with some next steps. So that's what you can expect today. And next, I'm going to pass things over to Adriana to lead us through our introductions. So Adriana.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jessica. All right. Well, last time in our part one, we got a chance to dig into a little bit longer introductions. So this time we're going to keep our introductions brief. So if you could just say your name, your affiliation, and the location in which you're calling. And I'm going to be calling your names out. So for example, my name is Adriana Renteria. I'm the director for the Office of Public Participation, and I'm calling from Sacramento. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to call on Sergio. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, Sergio Carranza with Pueblo Unido CDC, located in the city of La Quinta. This is a tricky question for me. What water body is close to you? The only thing I can think of is the biggest one that we have is the Salton Sea, is what is close to us.
Thank you, Sergio. All right. How about Maria Luisa?
Yes, hello, my name is Maria Luisa, and I am a graduate of the Leadership Institute. I am from Visalia, the northeast portion. I am here to help the community closest to Visalia, and part of the reason is because I have a family member whose water dries out in every summer. And so it is important for me to assist in that as much as we can.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. All right, next, Camille Panu.
Hi, my name is Camille Panu. I'm the public member for SAFER. I'm currently in the East Bay area. Normally I'm calling out of Irvine. And as a result, the closest water body is the Lafayette Reservoir.
Thanks, Camille. All right, Castulo Estrada. Thank you, Casculo. All right, David Corey. Awesome. Thank you, David. Don White.
Hello, good morning. My name is Dawn White and I am with Golden State Water Company. I'm calling from my home in Placerville, California. Besides small creeks and ponds, the closest water body is probably Folsom Lake.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. All right, Emily Rooney.
Good morning. My name is Emily Rooney. I'm with Agricultural Council of California. I am zooming in from my home in Lodi, California. And the closest body of water to me would be Lodi Lake, which is fed by the Mokelumne River.
Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
Everett McGee.
Yeah, my name is Everett McGee. I'm with Fuller Acres Water Company in Bakersfield, California. Closest body of water would be Kern River.
Awesome. Thanks, Everett. Horacio Amezquita. Great. Thank you, Horacio. Isabel Solorio.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Isabel Solorio, and I'm calling from my home in Linares. As for the closest body of water, I would have to say the only thing we have around here are the various channels, since we do not have a huge water body near here.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel. Jianmin Huang.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jamie, and I'm calling from my office in Woodland. I'm with Yolo County, and closest water bodies would be Cass Creek and Sacramento River.
Thanks, Jianmin. Jonathan Nelson.
Hi, everyone. Jonathan Nelson with the Community Water Center. Actually on the East Coast right now, not too far from the Atlantic Ocean.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. How about Lucy Hernandez? Awesome. Thanks, Lucy. Michael Prado Sr. We can hear you. We can see you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Michael Rincon.
Morning, everyone. My name is Michael Rincon. I am a policy researcher at Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles. Though we work in Southeast LA, I'm personally calling from my home in Thousand Oaks, California. And the closest water body to me would be both Lake Sherwood, and the Pacific Ocean.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. All right, Sandra Chavez.
Hello, I'm Sandra Chavez. I am a domestic well owner from Visalia. No, I'm sorry. I'm with the Visalia Community Water Center, domestic well owner, and I'm located in Porterville. And the closest water body would normally be the Tule River, but since it's dry right now, it's Lake Success.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. And Sergio, we already heard from you. Are there any other advisory group members we didn't get a chance to hear from yet? I think that was all of us. So thank y'all so much. Welcome. Next, we're going to pass the mic back to Jessica, who's going to lead us into introducing our first conversation item.
Great, thanks, Adriana. And again, welcome everyone. So we're actually going to go directly into our drinking water needs assessment recap. So I would like to invite our drinking water staff to join us.
Hi, Jessica. This is Kristen.
Hi, Kristen. Welcome.
Thank you. Turn on my camera. See my face. All right. Next slide, please. Just a recap for the needs assessment. We always like to start with where this is coming from, why we are trying to identify at-risk systems, and that's because we have a lot of failing water systems in the state. We have currently about 331 failing water systems, and we call those our human right to water list systems. Those are systems that are failing to meet the goals of the human right to water. Our goal as part of the needs assessment was to conduct a risk assessment so we can identify those systems that may be at risk of failing to meet the goals of the human right to water. This would help the water board be more proactive in providing technical and financial assistance to those systems before they fail. We want to prevent systems from getting on this list rather than reacting to water systems being on this list. Our estimates is that there are about 47 unique water systems that come onto this list each year. And so in order to prevent them, we need to create this early warning methodology for identifying at-risk systems, which we were able to do this year. Next slide, please. Our risk assessment, we had two different methodologies. One was for public water systems that looked at 19 different risk indicators or pieces of data. We identified 617 at-risk systems. I do want to emphasize again that this was looking at a smaller subset of public water systems. It was systems with 3,300 service connections or less, and K through 12 schools. So this assessment excluded large water systems. We had a separate methodology that looked at identifying at-risk state small water systems, which are those very, very tiny systems, and domestic wells. We have very limited data for these systems. So we developed, with the help of our Division of Water Quality did this work, but they developed an aquifer risk map looking at available data for groundwater to try to identify areas where domestic wells and state small water systems may be accessing source water that is contaminated. That assessment identified 611 at-risk state small water systems and nearly 80,000 at-risk domestic wells. Next slide, please. We then needed to figure out, well, how much is this going to cost the state? You guys are all going to be helping us develop kind of our priorities for the fund expenditure plan. But we needed to get a sense of how much it would cost both the state and local communities to implement long-term solutions for our human right to water list systems and our at-risk systems. So we used a cost model to model potential solutions. And then we did a long-term forecasting to identify what those funding needs might be. So we looked out for the next 5 years. We said for the number of what we think would be the number of human right to waterless systems and at-risk systems, this is how much it would cost. But in order to do a funding gap analysis and to help you all with your discussions, we wanted to break out that price tag to say how much is actually grant eligible, because not all projects would qualify for grants, either because of the community size or the project size, or the community's economic status. If it's not a disadvantaged community, it's not going to qualify for as much grant dollars. So you can see here, when we refine our estimated costs, we have $3.25 billion in need for grant eligible costs. And then the rest of it, anything that's not grant eligible, would actually need to be financed either out of pocket through a loan or by increasing water rates. And we all know that if we get a loan for something, we often have to pay interest payment costs, right? There's a cost of financing. So we wanted to estimate how much all of that would be in the long run for communities, because that's where the burden would lie. So the total local cost share is estimated to be $7 billion. And we can break that up. 4.05 billion would be eligible for state water board loans, and 2.95 billion would not be eligible for state water board loans. This would cover O&M costs that aren't, receiving a grant, interest payments. You usually can't get a loan to cover interest payment. So those are the things that are captured there. Next slide, please. So we took those refined estimated costs and we look at the state water board's available grant and loan programs to try to figure out, well, what's our gap going to be? Do we have enough funding to meet these needs over the next 5 years? And we found there was a $2.05 billion grant funding gap when we looked at all of our available grant programs. So this was the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, plus the Drinking Water SRF Set-Aside Grant Funding Program and other grant programs. We also found a financing gap, a loan gap, if you will, of $2.55 billion. And this was just looking at the State Water Board's Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund program. And again, 2.95 billion is not eligible for grant or loan. So that's the gap that we were able to identify in our assessment. Next slide, please. The last piece of our needs assessment was trying to assess affordability challenges. We called this the Affordability Assessment, and I went over these definitions with you guys last time, but again, I think it's really important to think about the framing of affordability when we talk about how we measure affordability. This is what I like to call the affordability nexus of definitions, because I feel like they're all related. Again, when we often think about affordability, we think about household affordability and our ability to pay our water bills. If a household is unable to pay for their water, they often face potentially shutoffs and other accessibility issues. The next is community affordability. Community affordability is obviously impacted by household affordability. You may have a community where one household or a few households have affordability challenges, but the community as a whole may not have affordability challenges. The community, for the most part, is able to meet or to pay their water bills. They're able to financially support their water system. But you may have community affordability challenges where the majority of households within a community struggle to pay their water bills. And when enough households within a community struggle to pay their water bills, a water system will then have financial capacity challenges especially when it comes to making larger investments that they need to make in order to respond to drought challenges, to expand their water system, or to do the type of O&M that's needed to maintain their current water system. And so that's really water system financial capacity. When we're looking at affordability from a water systems perspective, they're looking at their ability to meet both their short-term, their day-to-day costs, so being able to pay their operators, maintain their current system, but then they also need to be forward-looking, right? Infrastructure doesn't last forever. They need to be able to make those big investments when they need to replace a facility, when they need to replace a lot of pipeline, or to build a new well. Those costs, those long-term costs, they need to financially plan for those. And so a water system's financial capacity, they need to look at rate setting and be able to increase their rates if they need to meet these infrastructure needs. But that all impacts household affordability. They may not be able to increase their rates to pay for these things that they need to invest in because households would not be able to afford those increased rates. So it's all interconnected, and it's important to think about the trade-offs and what we're actually measuring when we're talking about affordability. Next slide, please. For this year's affordability assessment, we looked at 3 different metrics or affordability indicators that had different thresholds for each. The first is % median household income, which is, again, looking at how much of a household's total annual income was being spent on water services, drinking water services. If it was above 1.5%, so they were spending more than 1.5% of their annual income on water, then they were above the affordability threshold for that indicator. And you can see here that 121 disadvantaged community water systems and 313 severely disadvantaged community water systems were above that threshold. We then looked at extreme water bill, which is looking at whether or not the water rates charged by that water system are above 150% of the statewide average water bill. So comparing water bills across the state. So if you have a pretty high water bill, you may have community members that are struggling to pay. You can see here the results of that analysis. And then the last one here is % shutoffs due to non-payment. If a system reported to us that they had 10% or more of their customers experiencing shutoffs due to non-payment in 2019, then they were above the threshold here. And you can see there were 35 systems, DAC systems, and 62 SDAC systems above that threshold. I do want to emphasize again that that data was pulled from our 2019 reporting year. And we recognize that there was a shutoff moratorium for 2020. So this indicator will not be used next year in the affordability assessment or in our risk assessment. I believe that's the last slide. You can just confirm by moving forward.
It is, Kristen. And so now we want to give our advisory group members an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you just want to raise your hand, your Zoom hand, to let us know if you have a question, then for Kristen, please go ahead and do so. Jonathan Nelson.
Hey there. Thanks so much for all the great work that went into this needs assessment. This really is helping us further our ability to understand the need and dig into the details. So, so thank you for that. We're still working our way through the report. And so we'll be following up with more questions, but wanted to flag one for now, that it appears that the report or we were just struck by the high percentage of systems that were identified as the solution being point of use, and the relatively low percentage of systems that were identified as a solution being consolidation. And our sense of that was it may have been because the report utilized the IUP $60,000 per connection threshold. And that may have limited maybe the amount of systems that were identified as potentially being considered for consolidation in this analysis, and was just hoping if you could help us better understand, why the point of use, why the percentage of systems identified for point of use solutions was so high and that the consolidation was so low.
No, it's a good observation, Jonathan. And we were also a little surprised, I think, by the results of that, given the restrictions that we had to have in place around cost for consolidation. We want to first recognize that point of use, point of entry devices that, as a long-term solution is not something that we typically look at, and we recognize definitely the environmental justice concerns around that as a long-term solution. So it is something we want to try to look at for the next iteration. How can we maybe improve that? But I want to start with actually where we looked at consolidation potential. We're only looking at consolidation potential as it extends 3 miles along a road from a water system's boundary. So there we already had limitations built into our model in terms of distance, which limited the number of consolidation potential projects to even be considered. And then when we looked at because remember, we looked at both the resiliency, the long-term resiliency and sustainability of potential solutions with their cost. And unfortunately, the cost comparison, especially when you break it down by cost per connection for very small systems, consolidation costs end up being a lot higher than POE/POU, which is why the cost models tend to skew a little bit more towards POE/POU as the model long-term solution. I do want to just emphasize, though, that the results of the cost assessment model in terms of our solutions selected is really just meant to come up with a larger price tag for how much long-term solutions for the state may cost. It in no way is influencing the water board and our, in what we think should be the long-term solutions for water systems. And in no way do we want to influence local decisions around what their long-term solutions should be. This is very much based on a model that has imperfect data at the local level, which is one of the reasons why this data isn't being posted anywhere. It's not supposed to influence things locally. But we do recognize some of those limitations. And I think we would have to work internally with DFA and others around the cost decisions that are in that decision tree that you're referencing, if those would need to change for next year.
Yeah, I would. That's super helpful. I guess we would just offer that, of course, part of the value of this document is the price tag. And if we could think about in the next iteration, or maybe even sooner, just being able to adjust some of these threshold assumptions or inputs, like, for example, maybe we adjust or look at the IUP 60K, cost threshold, because if that's resulting in, so many systems and us not understanding what the long-term solutions are actually going to cost, because so many systems were identified, the long-term system being as point of use, point of entry, then that doesn't actually help us understand as much as we would ultimately want to, the actual true cost to provide truly sustainable long-term solutions for impacted communities. So again, really appreciate the work. This is such a great start. It really helps us be able to have this kind of conversation, but we would be interested in trying to better understand what the true cost would be if more systems were actually being considered for consolidation, and adjusting some of these cost thresholds like the IUP 60K per connection threshold.
Which is definitely more of a political decision to be made. I'm not sure if Michelle or Jasmine wanted to weigh in on those cost assumptions in terms of decision thresholds.
Yeah,
You know,
Jonathan.
if I could jump in really quickly, I don't want it to completely derail this conversation because these are really good topics. Unfortunately, we only have a limited amount of time, and a lot of what we're trying to do today is get clarifying questions in. And I know we're going to be discussing the needs assessment and future iterations of that in other forums. So we have 4 other people that have questions. So I'm hoping we could get to those, and maybe if we have more time, we can wrap back around to these, or these are some of the things that maybe could be discussed in our small groups later, if you don't mind. And I don't want to, I know Michelle, you were going to say something. Did you want to have like a last statement?
You know, that's okay. I will connect with Jonathan another way. Thanks.
That would be great. Thank you. I apologize. We're just on limited time. So next we have Maria Luisa. You have a question?
Sí, sobre lo que es del agua que va a los hogares, mi pregunta sería, ¿qué es lo que se tiene que hacer más en la comunidad o para bajar el costo del agua y no llegar a cortarles el agua a las personas, puesto que es algo que se necesita en las casas? ¿Qué es lo que más se puede hacer en eso?
Yes, thank you. Regarding the household water and lowering the cost, because the household water, that's what's mostly needed. So what can we do to really address this?
I do know that there are efforts underway to help with the implementation of pilot customer assistance programs statewide. There are federal dollars available. They're becoming available that will help address customers that are struggling to pay their water bill, but those programs are currently being set up. It may take a little bit of time for full implementation. You know, this needs assessment was not looking at how to solve affordability challenges, but to try to understand the full breadth of what those challenges may be, so that we can start thinking a little bit about how we can respond to them. So unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that, but it's a good question to bring up.
Thank you. Next, Horacio.
Yes. How was the Chromium 6 needs considered with the water systems?
In terms of the risk assessment?
Yeah, in terms of since Chromium 6 is not officially regulated, but it still is a dangerous chemical, do you consider it in the needs assessment cost?
It was not included in this analysis, but something that we're looking at for the next one, potentially.
So you're gonna still maybe consider it?
Yes.
Kristen, wasn't it included for the domestic wells?
I believe it was, but I would want to double check that before I confirm it. I'd have to confirm with Emily.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, how about Camille?
Hi, thank you. I have 2 clarifying questions. The first is about the consolidation potential being 3 miles along a road. And I guess I was just wondering why it had to be along a road as opposed to just 3 miles. And then I have one other question.
It's a good question, Camille. It's more likely that there may be infrastructure already there along the road to connect with. You know, if we were to just do random, you know, from any boundary, it's less likely that there would actually be infrastructure there. It'd be less feasible.
Okay. Yeah, so something to think about for the next one, I guess. The other thing I wanted to ask was about the long-term life cycle cost of consolidation. Was the cost per connection calculated only on those homes that were, or only on those connections that were added to the system? So what I'm asking is, was the cost of consolidation in the long term assessed in consideration of the entire consolidated system, or only the homes that were connected to a different system?
It would be the added cost of connection of bringing those new connections online. So it wouldn't, our cost did not look at the full cost of operating the new combined larger system with the new connections. It's the additional cost of adding those new connections. So it's the additional cost of those new connections. Does that make sense?
That part makes sense to me. The part that I'm getting a little hung up on, or that I'm not understanding, is how you all measured resiliency for the lifetime cost, if that makes sense. Because once I understand the upfront cost is quite high for a consolidation, but once those homes are added, I would think that the per connection lifetime cost would come down considerably, because now you're in the consolidated system. So even though you're maintaining very specific infrastructure, one of the benefits of consolidation is that it brings down the cost per connection for upkeep. And so that's the part where I'm not entirely understanding how that was calculated. So if you could clarify, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I, these details are in the appendix of the paper, so I do encourage you to take a look at that. Michelle, you're a bit more familiar with this piece. Did you want to step in on this one?
Sure. So Camille, a couple of things too, just on the 3 mile radius, just stepping back. So that was done because usually construction is done along roadways. And so that was what made the most sense. In terms of the cost assessment, there was, we assessed like for POE, we did look at the lifetime cost of like replacement of those, and we looked for consolidation at the upfront cost of connection and additional source capacity and things like that, and the pipeline. But then the actual cost to the O&M cost, we tried to keep everything sort of apples to apples by comparing things that would be similar. So the O&M costs of consolidation were incredibly low. We started looking at the pumping costs, the electricity costs, and they were so low that they were almost negligible. But some of the things we didn't look at because we didn't look at it with treatment, we didn't look at it other things, was like the replacement of that pipeline. So if we're putting in a 3 mile pipeline and that's $3 million to replace, assuming a pipeline is about $1 million a mile, that we did not include that replacement cost because we didn't include that for treatment and other things. So part of the analysis was to try and be able to compare everything equally over that time period. So does that help?
Yeah, it helps a little bit. Yeah, I read the technical appendices, and so it's helpful to have kind of the thinking that's behind it, because I wasn't able to get these kinds of rationales. So I appreciate you explaining the thought process.
Yeah, and the 3 mile, and to go back to Jonathan's point, like the model predicted possible consolidations for about 35% of the systems, and that didn't include sort of regionalization. The model predicted that, but then when they looked at the cost, POU becomes more cost effective, particularly if you're not looking at regional solutions, because if you have a 16 connection public water system that's 3 miles out, it becomes very costly. So there was if you were above 25% in cost, it still chose consolidation over POU, but I think that's another policy point that you all should be discussing and board members should be discussing. So there's a lot in there, and we're happy to go into it in more detail too. I know Jessica wants to keep us moving, but I did want to throw those things out.
Yeah, that would be great. I think this would be a great topic for further discussion going forward, particularly since we have that study from a couple of years ago out of UC Davis that assessed consolidation cost, but didn't put on the limitation of there being a road, particularly in rural communities. That might end up being the inclusion of having a road might actually frustrate solutions that might be more viable than we think. But like I said, it's a great conversation piece for next year, and I appreciate you explaining the context of how it was approached this year.
Sure.
Thank you both. And I do want to let you know that we do intend on having future discussions related to much of what we're talking about here as we go through the rest of the year. So this will certainly not be the last time you have an opportunity to dig into this. Let's see, how about Dawn? Dawn White?
Yes, thank you. And I'll be brief. I think it's an amazing amount of really, really good work that's going to be of tremendous benefit. This being the first report, I know there'll be improvements year to year, and I also appreciate the means to be able to make corrections. I've gone through the report pretty thoroughly and a lot of the data, and I just want to make a point that I am seeing errors in the data, which is not unexpected given how much work went into this and all of that. So I really appreciate the means to be able to, get those corrections made easily and having that built into the process. I think I would additionally encourage LPA and DDW staff that know a lot of these systems to really dig in and look at the data and make sure it's correct. I think many of these small systems might not even know this is out there at this point. So I think amazing work, but we do need to, continue to work together to refine it and make sure the data being used is correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. And our last question we have for this session would be from Michael Prado.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, I was wondering, from a small disadvantaged, severely disadvantaged community that I serve on, what are they going to do for what is the plan, I should say, for to keeping up the O&M operating?
For small communities?
Yes, for the places that need it. I know that there's several communities, one that I can think of right offhand, that they're having to have to go through training to run their own water system, be at the board members I'm speaking. And so they're running the board, operating the board, and then at the same time doing the O&M part, the maintenance.
Right, which is necessary for every single water system. Typically O&M has been supported at the local level through water rates and charges. The Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund is unique in that some O&M assistance is eligible, but I think that's something you guys are going to be discussing in terms of how to prioritize those limited dollars and where they should be going and how much to support O&M.
And that is a great transition, Michael and Kristen. So thank you. We are going to be talking a bit about that.
I'm sorry, I do have a question. I thought I had left my hand on the laptop. But I would like to know, will the State Water Board meet the needs of domestic well communities? And how would the State Water Board help families afford the cost of using point-of-use filters in their homes?
I think those are all great questions. And I think that's something that DFA, our Division of Financial Assistance, will be able to discuss with you all. I think good questions. And Jessica, do you mind if I just correct one thing? Horacio had asked about Chrome 6, and we did get confirmation from Division of Water Quality that they did use Chrome 6 in their domestic well and state small risk assessment. So that was considered there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I wasn't done, excuse me.
And I'm sorry, and does Isabel have a question?
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta, voy a ser breve. ¿Cómo se han considerado los gastos de contaminantes nuevos en sistemas pequeños que al final el consumidor sale pagando? Mi pregunta se refiere a que nuestro sistema salió con benzina, es un contaminante nuevo, y se ha pedido al público si ellos quieren seguir teniendo la agua como la tenía, o sea, se estaba usando más cloro para que el agua no tuviera color ni el olor. Pero si queremos seguir con eso, teníamos que pagar nosotros. Eso es algo que en este tiempo de pandemia es todavía más difícil para sistemas pequeños. So, mi pregunta se basa a eso, que si esos fondos se ha tomado en cuenta para estas comunidades desfavorecidas. Gracias. Sí, gracias.
Yes, I do have one question, but I will be brief. So I want to know if new contaminants have been considered in these cost analysis, especially for small systems, for example, the ones that consumers have to pay for their water. In our system, we have identified benzene. In our system, we have identified benzene. It is a, and the public has been asked, if they have been using, the public has asked.
Before you switched over to Lucy. So I guess my whole question is, how will the SAFER program help?
This is the interpreter returning back to Ms. Isabel's question. The public has been asked if they would like to continue paying the water as usual. They were paying for adding chlorine for clearer water. And so now they have to consider whether they can pay to continue having that in their water. Due to the pandemic and the increased cost that this would make, I would like to know if these funds can be taken into consideration for that situation.
Thank you. Yes, our risk assessment and our human right to water list does capture systems and communities that are struggling with benzene issues. Any contaminant that has an MCL, a primary or secondary contaminants, those were all included in our analysis. So if the water system is trending towards the MCL or above the MCL, then those costs, those needs were captured in our cost assessment model and our cost calculations.
Thanks, Kristen. And to clarify with everyone too, who's had questions about the response to the findings in the needs assessment, you know, the needs assessment information is used to help inform the fund expenditure plan, which is what we're planning on discussing today. So I encourage you to bring up these questions and comments in your small groups when we talk about how we use the funding in the fund expenditure plan. That is going to be a question that we have you discussing in greater detail today. So with that, I would like to pass things over to Jasmine Oaxaca from DFA to talk a little bit more about the fund expenditure plan to get us ready for that discussion. So Jasmine, are you ready?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Jasmine Oaxaca, Supervising Engineer over the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water section in the Division of Financial Assistance. So today I'll be talking about the fund expenditure plan's priorities, where we invested our funds for both the larger SAFER program as well as the new Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund in this current fiscal year, 2020-21, and also show you estimates of funds available for projects from the larger SAFER program for next fiscal year as we prepare to develop the new fund expenditure plan. So later in today's breakout groups, we will discuss where you, the advisory group members, would like to see funds spent for the next fiscal year. Next slide, please. These are our existing funding priorities as adopted by the State Water Board in the fiscal year 2020-21 fund expenditure plan. At this time, we anticipate these priorities will remain the same for the new fiscal year's plan. The priorities are to address emergency or urgent funding needs where other emergency funds are not available and a critical water shortage or outage could occur, to address community water systems and school water systems out of compliance with primary drinking water standards, with a focus on small disadvantaged communities or DACs, to accelerate consolidations for systems out of compliance, at-risk systems, as well as state small water systems or state smalls, and domestic wells with a focus on small DACs, and also to provide interim solutions and initiate planning efforts for long-term solutions and fund capital projects for state smalls and domestic wells where source water is above a primary maximum contaminant level, or MCL. Next slide, please. So before we get into where we think we should invest funds for the coming fiscal year 2021-22, I wanted to show 2 slides on where we have encumbered funds for this current fiscal year 2020-21. And when I say encumbered funds, I mean where we have committed funds to projects. So this slide shows the distribution of funds encumbered for fiscal year 2020-21 by solution type across the top, over all funding sources that are available to us through the larger SAFER program for use towards drinking water projects in small disadvantaged communities. And as a reminder, these include the new Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, plus complementary funding through general obligation bonds, general fund appropriations, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund principal forgiveness or non-repayable loans, and loans for systems in disadvantaged communities. So in this current fiscal year, through the larger SAFER program, we have committed to projects $32.4 million for interim water supplies and emergencies, $8.1 million towards in amendments to existing technical assistance agreements, $1.5 million towards administrators, and $168 million in planning and construction projects. This totals about $210 million in investments this year. Next slide, please. So this slide has a lot of information on it, so I'll be spending some time here walking through this one. So looking more closely at the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund itself, this table shows the actual estimated encumbrance, that is funding amounts allocated to projects for fiscal year 2020-21 by solution type across the top and water system category on the left, compared to the target allocations that were established in last year's fund expenditure plan. Those ones are shown in gray text in parentheses. So for solution types across the top, interim water supplies and emergencies, we made significant investments towards interim water supplies and emergencies this year. The larger investments included a new well repair, replacement, and connection program, as well as amendments to some of our Central Valley regional programs for well testing, bottled water provision, and POU/POE installation and maintenance. These investments also set us up well, at least in the Central Valley, to assist with future drought impacts. There is one technical assistance agreement in place in the Central Valley, which will also be able to fund emergency projects directly through the TA provider. Moving on to technical assistance, there were 3 amendments to existing technical assistance agreements that were funded through the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund for items like general program outreach, a new O&M bridge loan program for systems that are experiencing a revenue shortfall due to COVID-19, and some smaller discrete tasks which can be conducted by the TA provider without prior approval of the State Water Board. Additional funding is reserved for an agreement being developed with a new TA provider, which would allow for partnership opportunities for large water systems with smaller water systems to provide technical expertise, mutual aid, and facilitate consolidation arrangements. For administrators, some safe and affordable drinking water funds were directed to support administrators this year due to the lack of availability of an alternative funding source. For planning, there were 2 projects that were funded through the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund for systems out of compliance. And per the SAFER program priorities, which I went over earlier, it is expected that more planning projects will be directed to go through technical assistance. For direct O&M support, one consolidation project, which is actually captured in the construction solution column, included $200,000 of direct O&M assistance as the consolidation incentive project, which was eligible per the fiscal year 2020-21 drinking water SRF intended use plan. Types of water system scenarios that would be considered as priorities for direct O&M assistance is still in development and will be further explored through the O&M pilot that we are working on and the ongoing refinement of the affordability threshold. For construction, 15 construction projects were funded through the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund for systems out of compliance, at risk, as well as other community water systems, and represented the largest solution type investment for fiscal year 2020-21. So moving on to water system category, which is on the left-hand side of the table, I'll just quickly mention that a majority of funding went to construction projects for out of compliance systems. These are the ones on the human right to water list, as well as systems identified as potentially at risk in last year's fund expenditure plan, which was pre-needs assessment. A large portion of funding also went to interim solutions for communities and households served by domestic wells or state smalls. For other program needs, we have 2 pilot projects that were identified in last year's fund expenditure plan. One was for innovative POU technology, and the other was for an O&M pilot. Both pilot efforts are underway, and the $3.2 million is in reserve right now to be used towards systems that will be identified to be part of the O&M pilot as we continue to move forward with that. And at this time, our actual staff costs for fiscal year 2020-21 for both the administrative and implementation tasks associated with the requirements of SB 200 are not yet available from our Division of Administrative Services, but they should be available when we put the fund expenditure plan out for public comment. Next slide, please. And so as you, the advisory group members, think about where you would like us to see, us allocate funds for this coming fiscal year 2021-22 in the breakout groups today. I wanted to also provide a sense of what funding we anticipate to be available for projects across the larger SAFER program. So early estimates that we have prior to year end show that we may have about $424 million available across the larger SAFER program. That's the number at the bottom right there. And around 110 million of that would be coming from the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. So as a reminder, the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund can be used to support all of the solution types shown across the top there, whereas some of our other funding sources may be more limited in what they can fund. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone of our timeline for the fiscal year 2021-22 fund expenditure plan. Some of the important dates as far as public participation are the planned release of the draft for public comment in early June, with discussion at another advisory group meeting planned on June 10th, as well as the board workshop on June 16th. The public comment period will be for 21 days, and we will propose the plan for board's consideration of adoption at the August 17th board meeting. So that concludes my slides, and I can take questions now.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. So again, advisory group members, if you do have a question for Jasmine, please raise your hand. I do want to clarify that at this point, since we're going to be having much longer discussions on the fund expenditure plan later, I'm asking that you keep your current questions to just clarifying questions on what Jasmine was presenting today. And you will have, again, time to discuss in groups your thoughts on how we prioritize the funding. But if you do have clarifying questions now, please raise your hand. All right, Jasmine, it looks like, oh, it says, oh, yes, I can put the last slide back up. Somebody was asking if we could put the fund expenditure, funding sources and uses. Is this the slide you're looking for, Camille?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Well, if there aren't any questions, then I think this is a good time for a break. We'll take a 10-minute break while we get situated for our breakout groups. I'll go ahead and leave this slide up while we do that for folks who do want to take a closer look at that to consider while we break. So if everyone could please be back at 10:18. All right, folks, it is now 10:18. So we are going to get started on the next section of our meeting today, which is our breakout session. So the goal of our breakout session today is to use the information that we've learned about the connection between the needs assessment and the fund expenditure plan to discuss the priorities in the upcoming fund expenditure plan and make sure they align with community needs. So before we begin, I'd like to remind folks of a few takeaways that we've heard today that I think will help us with our discussion. So just going to bring up this slide again that Kristen shared with us about the risk assessment results. So just taking a look here at the public water system, state small water system and domestic wells that were analyzed in the risk assessment, and then the number of systems that are at risk. And this is just important because while it's very important to focus on the out of compliance systems, we do recognize that there are a lot of at-risk systems as well. And as Kristen mentioned, if we are able to address those systems in advance and be proactive, it's going to be better for the systems and probably less costly in the long run. So we need to also remember that regionalization was found to be more affordable than individual consolidation. So again, if we're looking at a large number of systems in an area versus one or two individual consolidations at a time, that tends to be more affordable. And just reminding you that with the regionalization approach, that may take longer, but it could be better in the long run for the sustainability of the different systems. It's also important for us to remember when we're thinking about the priorities is that there is a significant amount of funding that will not be covered by state funding. So we need to think about that local cost sharing aspect. And again, local cost sharing means the water rates typically that would need to be increased to address these cost share requirements. Some other additional topics that we'd just like you to consider as you're doing your discussion is, oops, excuse me, had to moved here on our slide. There we go, in your breakout groups. The list of the systems that are out of compliance, which we often refer to as that human right to water list, is always growing. It's always going to grow because systems are moving in and out of the compliance. And Kristen did mention that. So systems typically only have are really in shape at the top of their game for a small period of time. And so as more challenges are coming into systems, we're going to see systems continuing to go in and out. So we have issues like climate change and fire and drought that can impact systems as well. And that may cause more of our at-risk systems to come out of compliance. So just some things to remember. Another thing related to that is to consider if we should be focusing on resiliency efforts to respond to potential droughts and how that impacts the priorities in our fund expenditure plan. Related to that as well is we recognize that there are some federal government funds that may be coming our way in terms of drinking water. There are some different things that have been identified in the American Rescue Plan and some infrastructure conversations. And so as we think about how we're going to prioritize funds in the FEP, it's important to remember that there may be other federal funding coming and just thinking about how that impacts our discussion. So one final thing is that the FEP does not focus on specific communities. So instead, we're really looking at that water system type or the categories where we should consider how much funding to provide. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Ted to put us into our breakout groups. Once you move into the group, you'll have a facilitator who will lead you through several questions and give you some background on each of those questions as well. So folks, if you just want to join the breakout room as it pops up, that would be great.
don't see a breakout room option. Are we left in a breakout room?
Some of us are going to stay here in the main room.
Okay.
Ted, let us know if everybody has already transitioned out and who is going to be staying in this main room with us. Is it just the four? Is it the five of us?
Looks like it.
Yes, so we have, yes, Jasmine, Lucy, Adriana, Isabel, Maria Luisa, Don. So yes, you'll be staying in the main room, and then the other participants have been broken out into the other groups.
Okay, awesome. I'm only able to see, and then is my camera on? I cannot tell.
It is.
Okay, because I'm only able to see a few people here. And Viviana's here as well?
Okay, and Viviana, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. Welcome. We are in a bilingual breakout room. I want to remind everybody and remind myself to speak slowly so that we give Viviana, our amazing interpreter, the opportunity to translate. So in our breakout, we're going to be having a conversation about three main areas. The first area that we're going to be discussing is fund expenditure plan priorities. The second area we're going to be discussing is water system categories and how we prioritize different types of water systems. And then our final conversation is going to be related to drinking water solutions. So the type of solutions that we want to prioritize. So again, like Jessica mentioned, today, what we're going to be trying to brainstorm with you all is how do we use what we learned in the needs assessment to align it with the funding from the fund expenditure plan. Okay, so before we jump in, I want to just see if anybody would be willing to be our reporter today for our group. And they would be sharing information from our small group to the larger group.
I can do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don. Okay. So we're going to jump into the first section, which is the fund expenditure plan priorities. So I want to just do a very quick recap of a couple of different things Jessica mentioned. Are you all still able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I want to show the slide that Jasmine just went through. So to clarify, the fund expenditure plan that we're discussing today, it's only it's only one part of the larger, safer budget, right? So I want to clarify what we're going to be talking about today is this first line at the top, not all of the other funding programs that exist. Last year, we didn't have a fund expenditure plan. So what you all discussed as an advisory group were just estimates. Now we have more information about at-risk water systems, domestic wells, and state smalls. That's what we have now. That's what's new this year. We learned that if we don't address the needs of at-risk water systems, later on, that can lead them to fail, and that could be more costly. And now we have an understanding of domestic wells and state smalls. We didn't have that last year. So those are some big important pieces that are different from last year. So the first question that we have for you all is related to the priorities of the fund expenditure plan. And I apologize for those of you who don't read Spanish. I only have the Spanish PowerPoint up, but the question is, do the priorities from last year need to be changed for this year based on what you've learned about the needs assessment? So I'm going to ask you all to take about 2 minutes to either write down your thoughts or think about them, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss it as a group, okay?
This is Jasmine. So I will pop into the chat the English version just in case anybody needs those.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay. All right, so why don't we just go around and see how everybody everyone's reflections on the fund expenditure plan priorities. So I'll go ahead and start off with you, Lucy. What do you think about the fund expenditure plan priorities?
I think that this is something that we need to prepare ourselves, because I noticed that last time, and the drought and difficulties that our communities have faced in the past, we are not prepared, and that's something that we need to have a plan in place to see how we could assist the necessities faster, not to take too long in response when it's an emergency.
Okay, so would you want to change anything about, so the first priority on the fund expenditure plan is related to emergencies. Would you want to see anything change for that priority?
Yes, I would like to see que sea una respuesta rápida.
Okay, so a quicker response to emergencies?
Yes.
Awesome. Does that resonate with anybody else in the group? Dawn, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, and I think that validates that particular, as a priority. I mean, her comments are basically validating emergency response as the priority or the higher level.
Awesome, thanks, Dawn. How about you, Dawn? When you're thinking about the priorities, anything that you would change? Do you agree with them?
No, I agree. I think they're still appropriate.
Okay. How about you, Maria Luisa? Anything you would change about the priorities?
Bueno, mi prioridad sería también que le dieran prioridad a los que son sistemas de agua pequeños y a los puestos domésticos, puesto que viene el verano y
the reason is that they were not able to collect any water fees last year. So I just do not know for that regard whether they can get some assistance.
Jianmin, I'm wondering if this is something that maybe we can touch base with you on separately and do a follow-up, since there's a very specific community.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, Jessica, the larger context, though, could be like, to what extent would we support the O&M costs when a given system, whether it's a privately run system or a local government running a public water system, if they have revenue shortfalls, right? So I think that's probably the broader context from the particular example.
Okay.
Thank you.
So does anyone else have thoughts on the priorities?
Yes, I'm not sure if there's going to be help for homeless population that don't have drinking water access, that don't have toilet access, that don't have showering access. Is there going to be money for that or not?
Joe, do you want to speak to that one as well, please?
Well, that wasn't a prior, the board mentioned that last year, but did not make it a priority. So again, this discussion is like, what all do you think the priority should be if it's different from what you see here, or if you're suggesting in a certain area that there be further explanation of what might fall under a given priority category.
Well, I think there should be water fountains all over the place. it should be a priority because there's the people that are most in need, they don't have access to at least drink water, you know?
So Horacio, you think that that access to drinking water for homeless populations should be one of the priorities?
Yes.
Okay.
And all the parks and everywhere that people can drink water.
So this is David. I mean, I agree with these fund expenditure priorities, and I'm not sure whether if you were in a particular issue where you had a homeless population who had no access to drinking water, whether that would fit into the first priority, which is addressing emergency or urgent funding needs. I don't know if it would or not. I think it would probably be a case by case kind of thing, but. I don't see that the needs assessment has really changed the prioritization that's listed here. It makes sense to me.
Thanks, David. How about Michael? Do you have any thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, you know, I've been listening to everybody here. Of course, they went before me, but you know, I agree with Horacio. If you put drinking water fountains, the only thing is you need to put you're gonna have to put showers, you know, as it is right now. If there's drinking water fountains, I use it to shower or bathe. Of course, you know, clean up, wash up. My daughter works at an AM/PM, and she says the public bathroom there, they've had to shut down to customers only. And even when it's customers only, they're having people in there, you know, using it for a shower or washroom. I mean, some of them are even going as far as using the toilet water. That's how bad it is, you know, the homeless situation. So, I mean, that's part of, you know, having safe, clean, and affordable drinking water, which is law. So yes, I'm strongly support that too, Horacio. But what I would like to share, if I may, we have a consolidation project that we just did, and I'm very happy to speak on. I don't know if now would be the time. You can tell me.
Is it related? Do you think it relates to the discussion of priorities, or do you think it would be better to discuss related to how we spend funding?
Well, I think it maybe touches a little bit of both.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and share it with us and we can.
Okay, we have a public water system here in Sultana, which provides water for approximately 200 meters, 200 metered homes, which can have multiple connections to that main meter. So then we consolidated and took Munson, which is a community that's approximately 3 miles from us, south of us in Sultana. It's Munson. The school here, elementary school in Sultana, was started in Munson, so they share the same school. The school is called Munson Sultana School. And in Munson, we took them over when I went before the Tulare County meeting that they had talking about this like 5 years ago. And we took them in, they got a new well that went in. So obviously they got taken off the highly contaminated nitrate wells that they were on, their domestic wells. But now we're able to connect along that roadway to Munson, 3 miles approximately, and connect. Like there's 16 homes that have TCP 1, 2, 3, some have nitrate, and they're able to connect to the system. It's optional. They can connect or stay as they are. Some have chosen just to stay as they are. Some do not want to even know if their water is bad or good. But yeah, I'm very happy. The consolidating deal is obviously a good thing. I was more for the regionalization, which we tried, and that fell apart due to wanting power and wanting to run the show versus let's all make the plan and we can work if we can work together, we can make it happen. Well, there's communities that just are not game players, team players, I should say. So, but hey, consolidation is a beautiful thing if you can help people. In Munson, we have 30 connections right now. We have a phase 2 going in, which is going to run the external pipeline from Munson, Sultana to Munson. We'll be able to share their well. We're going to get a new well, which was funded by the Prop 1 money, the first round. And as I speak, they're in the test hole, and we're waiting for the hydrologist report. But that's all I had to say. So it kind of fills in on both. Right now, what we need here in Sultana is infrastructure. Our distribution lines are shot. They've been in there for 40 years. So we're sprouting leaks all over, putting Band-Aids. When you patch up one leak, it sprouts somewhere else. So, but other than that, we are good.
All right, thanks, Michael. So it sounds like you have, you had a couple different points in there. You had the consolidation piece, which was very, very beneficial, and it sounds like you support that. And then also this idea of needing more infrastructure funding.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's those are 2 key points. Thank you.
Thank
Jonathan, did you want to share on your thoughts on the priorities?
One quick clarifying question. Are outreach and engagement costs just baked into each of these categories?
Yeah, we don't separate them out.
I think these are right. Definitely appreciate Horacio and Michael's point about the challenges related to access to water and sanitation for a homeless population. I know we flagged that before, so we should continue to just recognize that need. The other thing I would just flag, and I know, Joe, you and your team are thinking about this a lot, is, how do we ramp up the sort of level of discussion, the level of planning that's happening at the local level around consolidation opportunities. And then on the domestic well side, how are we, and the really small communities, how are we doing enough outreach so that way people without safe water aren't, the burden isn't on them to reach out for assistance. So I would just name those 2, as continued priorities, because I know you're also thinking a lot about them.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section. They keep pinging us and trying to get us to move on. Let's see. So the next section that we get into has to do with how we are the water system categories. So there are many different types of water systems in California, and we have different data and information on them. And then we also fund them a little differently. So public water systems, which are some of our at-risk and out-of-compliance systems. We have the State Water Board regulates those systems, and there is funding available. For out-of-compliance systems, which do not meet the standards for clean water, which basically means you can't drink the water because there's a chemical or contaminant in there at unhealthy levels. And I want to make sure that we're just kind of have the same basic information, which is why I'm giving you some of these. So the at-risk systems, again, are water systems at risk of going into that category. Maybe they've failed in the past, maybe they're close to reaching the maximum contaminant level. So, you take a look at the types of systems we have here. We have these out of compliance systems, and then the systems that are at risk. And then finally, we have the state small and domestic wells. So, one thing that I think it's important to clarify is that for the other systems, we have a framework within the water boards to assist the out of compliance and at risk public water systems. But for the domestic wells and state smalls, we don't really have a framework for that. And we don't regulate those because they're on private property, but our needs assessment does identify this as a need. So that's just something to consider. And I want to confirm with with our technical folks on here, the state small water systems, those are the systems that serve 5 to 14 connections. Is that correct? So that everyone understands that. Seeing a nod.
Yeah, these are the small ones typically regulated by LPAs, counties.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so basically the situation that we're in is we understand there's a big need. Kristen shared that with us and showed us all that information, but we only have in safe and affordable drinking water funding a certain amount of funding for that. And then we also have these other categories that Jasmine went over. But we need to know, how are we going to spend the funding in different areas? So you take a look at these yellow highlighted sections here, kind of goes over that. So you can see where we've allocated funding to each of the different categories that we just discussed. So if we go on to the question, what we're essentially asking you to do is, based on what you've heard today about the needs assessment and reviewed, hopefully, how should the water system categories be prioritized? So could you tell us from basically 1, 2, 3, and 4, what are your top, or 1, 2, and 3 in this case, your top funding priorities? Should we be spending most of our time on out of compliance systems, at-risk systems, or state smalls and domestic wells? And I think what would be helpful in this situation too is, you can certainly, we can talk about that. You can also share it in the chat if you prefer.
Okay, I think on the systems that are out of compliance, it would be a good idea if we can take care of the ones that are very old and that they're disadvantaged, because there's systems that are 30, 40 years old out of compliance. That's one. On the systems at risk, I think it should be if they can be connected to other systems that have clean water, and make sure that the place where it's going to be connected is sustainable clean water. And the state in domestic wells, I think we should have an accounting for all the systems that can be accounted for, because we don't know how many state smalls are in each county, and we don't know how many domestic wells are in each county. So we should have a better idea of those systems, so we can know how much is the damage that is in each county. So we need to continue getting all that information to make sure that we get in the right data, and not just having certain numbers, because we need the best correct data to know how much damage is done in California. So I think the three of them are important, and we need to be working on each one in a way that it doesn't stop. Because if we don't count all the state smalls that are out of compliance, for example, in Monterey County, there's about 1,200 water systems, and there's about 250 out of compliance. So, and that's close to the water systems that are in Monterey County, but they don't have a count of all the domestic wells. So there's a big gap of data that we should be counting every well, and make sure that every well gets registered. There should be no private rights of hiding wells. Everybody needs to disclose their wells. Otherwise, we're not going to know the damage that is done to all over California. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thanks, Horacio. What do other folks think about prioritizing the water system categories?
Well, I had a quick question. Just, I think you may have already said this and I might have missed it, but the gray numbers in parentheses, is that, tell me how I'm reading this chart. There's the, sort of the bold, dark numbers and then the lighter numbers in parentheses.
So the lighter numbers are what the fund expenditure plan outlined, and then the bold numbers are what was actually encumbered. And then there's also this kind of reserve category, which is, it's not, the money's not put towards a project yet, but we're keeping that available so we can, fund projects. We have this in between time when we can't encumber money, but we want to keep projects moving ahead and make sure there's funding available. Did that answer your question, David?
Yes, it did. Did I fully understand it? I came close, but okay. Yeah, I know you answered my question.
Okay, yeah, forget what I said about reserve. So basically the gray numbers are what we said we are going to expend in each of the categories, and the bold numbers are what we actually expended.
Okay, in this last year. Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Just to sort of frame where we have been.
Okay, thank you.
I think on our side, the challenge for us is, that all of these are priority and important. So, which I know you all feel the same. So it makes this, a difficult conversation. I think in part it's challenging for us because this feels very abstract, like domestic wells versus public water system, interim supplies versus planning and direct O&M. That feels abstract. And then we've got these numbers out here that at least, for I think most of us, like we don't know if 10 million for state smalls is right versus 20 versus 30. So it feels very abstract, this prioritization conversation. I think in a perfect world, this probably isn't realistic. Although maybe you all are already doing some of this on your side, would be to sort of game it out or do some scenarios. So if we invested, 20 million in state smalls and domestic well category, that's what we think this would translate it into in terms of number of people served. And if we, if we bump that percentage up, it's almost like building a calculator. If we bump that percentage up, so it's like doubled, well then what does that mean in terms of the construction category that's dropped? How many less people are going to be served there? I don't know if that makes sense, or if that sort of scenario exercise is something you all are already doing internally.
Jonathan,
Jonathan,
can I ask a follow-up question on that? Are you prioritizing number of people benefiting? Do you think that should be a priority based on what you were just saying?
I think that I'm struggling to give any effective feedback on this prioritization conversation because it feels very abstract, and I don't know that on one hand, it seems like thinking about the number of people served could be valuable. Thinking about are those DACs versus not DACs? How long have they been without water? Just if there was different ways to be able to look at scenarios, I think that might lead to a more constructive, opportunity to give you feedback. I also recognize that's probably takes a lot of work, but I just wonder if that also is something that you all may already be sort of doing on the back end yourselves.
So Jonathan, I had similar thoughts on this in terms of how to balance that. And I sort of had a different, not different. I agree with you. Sort of number of served is, I think, important, but also the time to implement, I think, is another thing that we would factor into that decision-making process. If you can get something done quickly, relatively inexpensively and benefit a lot of people, that would be something we'd want to do, I would think. But it's sort of a balancing of financial, what we have available, how many people are served, how quickly they're served. Then I went through that, and then I thought, well, but there's another factor in here when you look at at-risk systems. if you spent some money right now, are you going to avoid problems in the future, and actually it'll be more efficient to do it now rather than wait and do it later. So there's a lot of competing interests that I would look at to try and figure out how we get the most benefit out of these funds. And it's hard to look at a chart like this and make those assessments. That's the same struggle you're having, right, Jonathan?
Right.
Yeah, so I guess just quick commentary. So welcome to our world. And, so of course, like the quick answer without gaming things out is that the state small's domestic wells are always going to be way more costly per connection. You're going to, for every dollar invested, you're going to get less benefit in terms of number of people, and it's going to take way longer. Guarantee that. And it'll be so obvious when if you were to compare the numbers. The same sort of thing we see with small water systems that are, say, public water systems, community water systems between, say, 15 and 100 people. Anytime you look at the numbers, they're huge cost per connection and with consolidation. So honestly, if you go to a, sort of bang for the buck type of approach, number of people affected, you would put all the money towards the, let's say 100 and above, 200 connections and above, and just focus totally on that, because that's where you would get the most benefit for the most folks. But again, like part of the policy balancing is, I'm assuming we want to make some investments in those other systems to help. At the very least, you're not going to help a lot of people, but at least you'll help frame the problem and the issues better.
Yeah, so
if you actually get in there, right?
Is there a way for you all to provide a couple of those scenarios where you just lay out 3 options, and if we're doing the most bang for the buck, and the least amount states, smallest domestic wells, that's how much, what would that amount look like? How many people do we think would be able to be reached? And then maybe ratchet it up a couple different scenarios and just help us understand what the level of impact looks like and how it changes across those couple different scenarios. Otherwise, I think we're just limited, at least on the CWC side, in terms of how much useful feedback we can provide. And also just want to so respect your workload, and if you come back and be like, okay, that's just so unrealistic with everything else, then I think that's helpful to understand. But I just wonder if you all already have to do that kind of analysis on your own internally.
Well, I don't think we do it in sort of a detailed way that maybe you're looking for. And I think that kind of analysis, I'd have to punt back to Kristen and her group, because they actually, worked on a lot of the modeling. My guess is it would require a deeper dive and take longer than we have. So we'll think about what we could do in terms of helping to provide a fuller picture as far as that goes.
Hey,
But
Joe.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
We do have in the cost assessment model results, we do break down the capital costs by connection. So you can look at different levels of service connections from 100 or less up to 3,300 and more. And you can see how capital costs for modeled solutions changes. You get the economies of scale with the larger systems, and the costs are much higher on the lower end. And we do have that broken out by, the human right to water list systems and the at-risk systems. We don't break it down further by population. You'd have to multiply those by maybe a factor of 3 or something to try to get towards population. But we have done some of that analysis already in our cost assessment model. What it's not doing, obviously, is taking the actual numbers here that were expended last year and breaking those down. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for, but you can get some of that in our current report. Hopefully that helps, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, basically, I think that would be super helpful. And and inside CWC, we're just trying to figure out, like, do we do that so we can just be able to give you better feedback, or just, I think we feel your struggle, Joe, in terms of being able to give you effective feedback when it's just based on this, and not, don't want to throw any stones either. This is just really difficult, because otherwise, feedback from the community, it's going to be, well, all these are important. And that, I know, isn't quite what you're looking for either, because I know you agree.
Yeah, the other way to think about it is that, Jasmine presented, we have all of those other funding sources, right? Those other funding sources are really targeted for public water systems, and largely for capital expenditures too. So that's the other way to look at this particular pot of money, which is supposed to be used to fill funding gaps, is what's the most effective way to deploy these resources, right? That's some of the thinking we go through, and like why you saw, say, a huge investment last year in interim supplies and emergencies, and why, we think there are some other opportunities there to use these funds to fill those gaps that aren't otherwise going to be filled.
So these water systems are the ones that already have an application, or there's a lot of systems that don't even have an application?
Yeah, I would say, so the systems out of compliance, by and large, we and DDW meet quarterly with each district engineer, and have gone through those systematically to try to make sure that they're all somewhere on the path of getting a solution. We haven't done, Kristen just came up with this at-risk systems list, so we haven't done that yet, but we imagine that we'll need to do the same sort of thing, kind of systematically look at each of those water systems with the LPAs and ask the question, what do they need now if they don't have an application in? Do they need technical assistance? Do they need something else to get them on that path to a longer term solution?
And we have already started to do technical assistance for our at-risk systems. We've started to connect them to TA providers, because sometimes they're at risk for not anything water quality related or infrastructure, but more on the technical, managerial, financial side, and they need some assistance, some training. So it's a little bit more complicated when you start looking at the at-risk list.
So there's already money for planning to advocate for systems that are out of compliance and don't have an application, and they need help to submit an application, and they need help to keep with the process going. There's already a plan how to gonna be reaching those systems that are not getting any help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of staff who are reaching out directly to our systems that are out of compliance. But I want to emphasize that it's the public water systems, the community water systems that are receiving that outreach. It's a little bit of a different story for the state smalls and domestic well systems. Those are harder to outreach, like you said, because we have limited data. We were using proxy data, whatever we have, to try to come up with an estimate of how many systems may be at risk. Those are typically brought in through consolidation planning efforts to see if they can be consolidated. And that's usually where outreach occurs, at least from the water board's perspective and through our technical assistance providers. And that's why you see the numbers broken out the way that they are here for those systems.
So should that be, I think that's been a priority for CWC, but should we, maybe I should just flag this, that, maybe we should think about a priority being more intentional and proactive domestic well and state small well testing, and not only have it just be tied to if you're being considered for a consolidation, in part because we don't even know where all these wells are. So, can we, as you of course probably know better than anyone else at this point after that report, so, should we think about an investment, of a couple $1 million, to increase our domestic well testing in high risk areas?
Joe, is that an eligibility under the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund?
Yeah, I mean, we already have something set up with self-help, and we're investing more in that program with them in the 8 counties they serve. You know, and I do think it's worth kind of thinking about like sort of strategically how to approach that. So there's not just sort of this scatter shot, right? Of thinking where there are those opportunities where there may be a willing partner, right? A willing local regional partner, like a county. Let's say if Monterey County was willing to do something where there may be some consolidation or other opportunities around state smalls and domestic wells, and there are large numbers of them, then, you know, you could imagine, you know, being able to go from the priorities to actually doing something, you know, doing some further detailed planning assessment that would lead to implementation. I think that's the key, right? You got to think it out. So it's not just, we're going to do a bunch of well sampling. It's like, where do we want to go? What's the vision in that particular,
well, it feels a little
particular area?
Because if we don't exactly know where all the wells are and we don't know what their condition is, then, you know, we're never going to have that piece of the puzzle to get to, you know, the solution part, because we don't fully understand the need part. So but I also appreciate everything you just said. I would just offer, when we hear from communities, and Horacio, you know, you kicked this off, yeah, that's a priority. More intentional domestic well testing in high risk areas.
And I think one of the excuses that the county uses is that they don't have staff. So why don't we use some money here to have someone at the county level and start putting all this information for you guys, so we know exactly how many state small and domestic wells are in the county, and how many are out of compliance, and how many can be connected to better systems. Because if we keep using excuses with public agencies, we're not going to advance. It's going to be the same thing that's been happening for 20, 30 years, and we need to stop this. We need to if the county doesn't want to cooperate, we have to provide money so they can cooperate, because this is public agencies. You know, we're supposed to protect the public.
Jianming, did you want to?
Sorry, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to share a couple of things with you. I'm working with LPA, local LPA. A couple of years ago, we partnered with RCAC to reach out to the communities to offer free water testing program. And we got a little bit success, but we received a lot of resistance from the private owners as well, because they are afraid that once their water is not potable, then the local government is coming in to condemn the wells. So when we decide to do the outreaching, we need to be really careful and be strategic on that part. And another thing I want to clarify or add to it is that we have another classification called Calco water system. I'm not quite sure whether you all heard about that, but it is a group of water systems that they are not public water system, and yet they serve water in restaurants. So it is called Calco. So I believe they probably need to be mentioned in this chart, along with state smalls and domestic wells.
You know, I just think that every well should be counted, and if it's drinkable, just count it as a drinkable, and if it's not drinkable, count it as a undrinkable, and make sure that everyone gets counted, no matter which wells where they at. They need to be counted, and they need to Also, we need to know exactly how much water they're supporting. We're having issues with seawater intrusion. We're having issues with overdraft. They're over pumping. They're leaving the aquifers empty. People are suffering. We cannot be hiding this information. This information needs to be out, and it has to be done because we cannot be just expecting to fix the problems when we don't even know how many wells are out there.
Horacio, there is a requirement in Senate Bill 200, which helped create the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, where counties are required to submit to the State Water Board their domestic well and state small water quality data, which would include location data. And my unit, we've been working with counties to start collecting that information. But you are right in that many counties don't have the resources or the staff to really pull together a full data set. And so we are trying to work with them on that, but there are no requirements for counties to collect this data in a way to then report it to us. So there's some limitations in legislation around all of this. We can definitely encourage counties to do it, but there are limitations in our ability to require them to do it.
Can we get out of this? Can we get this limitation out of the way? Because this, everybody has a well, and many of them report whatever they use and what is the quality and why other wells are not doing that. I think it has to be all over California. It has to be the same thing. Otherwise, we're not going to have the real picture of the damage that is happening in the Salinas Valley, San Joaquin Valley, especially when we're dealing with pesticides, fertilizers, petrochemicals. We're dealing with all kinds of stuff here that is putting the lives in
I don't mean
danger.
to cut you off, but we're getting close to the end, and I do want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity. Michael Prado has his hand raised, and I'd like to allow him some time to speak as well. Go ahead, Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We've already had the consolidation funds available for our project, but I just want to let you guys know, and I'm sure Joe knows that because he looks very familiar. I think he came out to look at our project with Paul Boyer, but it takes a long time to get funding. We need to expedite it somehow. And I know with the pandemic, it's going to even set it further back. So by prioritizing all these things, is there a fund there that SAFER has already established to, let's say, help the community that needs it right away, or help the domestic well owner, or how is that going to happen?
Yeah, so there are some programs that are set up with some of our non-governmental organization partners that are regional or statewide in scale. I think as mentioned earlier, the bottled water for schools, and that went really smoothly. Well, that was because we have a couple of providers who are able to, we have a single agreement with them, and then they're able to provide, hundreds of schools with solutions. So same thing with self-help. So there is some, I think Jasmine mentioned it, there's some, emergency funding and other kind of programs. We don't have that all throughout the state though. So that's, I think a need is we would need a partner for to have something like that work in other parts of the state. Otherwise, on a project by project basis, dealing directly with us is really going to just be slower.
Oh yes, God, it is. Okay.
Yes.
I know we have just a couple seconds here left, but I just wanted to share another thing is that like the school here in Sultana, the kids have to take a bottled water from their home they cannot drink the water at the school. Do you know why? Right now, you said that the schools are being provided with water, bottled water.
I can't speak to Sultana in particular, so I'm not sure, Michael. I'm sorry. I can look into that though.
And Michael,
Okay,
we'll make sure to follow up with you on that. And I don't want to cut folks off, but we're probably going to get yanked into the main room again pretty soon. And I just want to make sure that David, since you generously offered to be our reporter, to see if you wanted to ask any questions in terms of what you are going to share back in about a minute.
Well, yeah, my question would be, what would you like me to share back? I think I have a pretty good
domestic well
summary on the first part.
The domestic well testing, Corey.
Yeah, domestic well testing, some statewide consistency I heard.
States, malls that are already out of compliance and the ones that are not out of compliance, we need to know where they are. We need to know why we're not counting everyone.
So Corey, so intentional, proactive domestic well and state small testing, and making sure that that's happening as soon as we can and more widespread than what's happening right now, which is where it's more just based on consolidations, where we're considering consolidations. And then the other thing is to just think about whether we want to create maybe some scenarios to inform the fund expenditure plan. So that way we can just better understand if we're investing this amount of money in each of these categories, what does that translate into in terms of actual impact on the ground? And one last thing, Corey, sorry, but the more we can understand, how we're reaching people that haven't had safe water for how long, like if someone's not had water for 10 years, we should prioritize that. So understanding duration of time without water.
That's going to affect, that's related to our first part of the discussion where we're looking at the different factors that we're trying to balance. So trying to understand those, how long you've been impacted, what are the benefits, and trying to get some sort of scenario so we can better understand those different trade-offs. That's what you're asking for, right? That's what we're looking for.
Exactly.
And I think that the domestic well and state small testing actually fits into helping us have the information to be able to make that assessment.
Yeah.
Another thing, Michael Prado here, I can share is that the Water Commission in Tulare County, they started way back about maybe when the first drought hit, and I attend those meetings since then. And in that meeting, those meetings, they have a log of where the wells are. I don't know if every county has a water commission, but they have identified a lot of the wells.
Thanks, Michael. We'll make sure to note that. Does anyone else have any last minute statements before we go back to the main room?
Yeah, for staff, it's not you that these problems belong to you. These problems, they're 20, 50 years ago. So I'm just comment for things like that, but you guys are doing a good job, except that it's too much,
Thanks, Horacio. We appreciate that. All right. Looks like we're being called back in, so you can join the main session. Just click on that Leave Breakout Room button.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Are we in break?
Yes.
We'll be on break for about 10 minutes, everyone.
Thank you.
When do we get back?
11:28.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we'll fix this slide right now, and I'll put this in the chat.
Folks, it's 11:28, so if you could come back on and join us, share your video if you can, great. So now that we've had an opportunity to chat with each other about the needs assessment and the fund expenditure plan in smaller groups, we're going to talk about these as a whole so that we can hear what everyone talked about in their groups. And then also we're going to do some Zoom polls as well to get some feedback from you. So we appreciate you participating in both the discussion and the Zoom polls. So the first section we talked about was the fund expenditure plan priorities. So in a moment, you're going to see a Zoom poll on your screen regarding the first discussion topic, which was if the funding priorities from last year need to be changed for this year. So Ted, if you could please launch our poll. So folks, if you could just select your answer here, we'll leave this open for a little while and let folks think about how they would like to respond. Let us know what your thoughts are on if the funding priorities from last year need to be changed for this year. The answers are no changes needed, minor changes needed, a few changes needed, many changes needed, and then the final one is that all of the priorities have changed. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling here and share the results with you. So it looks like about 30% of folks said no changes are needed. Another 20% said minor changes. The majority of folks are saying a few changes are needed, and then we do have a few folks that think that many changes are needed. So thanks for that. Now let's go ahead and have each group's reporter take just maybe 3 minutes or less to share the main takeaways from your group. So to start things off, why don't we have David was in my group, so I apologize. I'll pick on you first if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Well, I appreciate you making me the guinea pig. So you can hear me okay, I assume?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the first one I think is probably an easier one to report out on the fund expenditure plan priorities. I think we generally agreed with the prioritization as listed and as was prioritized last year. There were a few, questions as to how issues might fit into there. One of the questions related to homeless populations and their drinking water needs, and if there's a way we could integrate those particular needs of the homeless population into our plan, into the prioritization plan. Also was an interest in looking at infrastructure needs within communities so that the water can get distributed properly, and understanding those needs are important in the prioritization. And then overall across, I think all of the areas, outreach is important in implementing, regardless of the prioritization, making sure that the communities that are impacted get the appropriate outreach so that they understand what the opportunities are there and they can express the needs to the board. So I think that captures the first discussion. Is there anything else that I missed there? If not, I'll try and look at the second side in terms of trying to look at allocation of the resources. This was, I think, a more difficult, or at least more lengthy
David,
discussion.
If you want to put a pin on that really quickly, I think we're going to come back to that and give you a chance.
Oh, okay.
So you can think a little
Excellent.
longer on it.
Thank you for that one. Good.
Yeah. So Itzel, who was the reporter in your group, if they could share with us?
Yeah, our reporter was Sandra Chavez.
Great, Sandra, if you could help us and share what you talked about for this first section.
Hello, our group, we all generally agreed that everything that's already on the priorities list should remain as is. We only thought about adding O&M as a priority, as well as drought resilience.
Great, thank you. And then how about for Adriana's group? Who is your reporter?
We had Dawn.
Hi. Yes, our group's very similar. We generally agree that the priorities are still appropriate. We did have some good discussions on the emergency response and agreed it should be a high priority, but we're hopeful that those solutions could maybe be found more quickly, given that we're going into a drought and some of the COVID issues that are going on. We also, there were some thoughts that small systems and domestics should be a higher priority, and long-term solutions that lead to consolidation, like such as consolidation, should be a higher priority, but really agreed basically that it was good as it was.
Great, thanks, Dawn. All right, let's look at question 2. So again, we're going to do a poll, and it looks like we just started the next poll, which says, how should the water system categories be prioritized for funding in 2021? So the responses you'll see here is a high priority for out of compliance systems, high priority for at-risk systems, high priority for state smalls, and a high priority for domestic wells. And then you can also choose low priorities for each of those. Low priority for out of compliance, low priority for at risk, low priority for state smalls, or low priority for domestic wells. Okay, folks, if you want to keep completing the poll if you can, we'll leave it open for a few more seconds. All right, let's take a look at the responses here. So it looks like the majority of you feel that that out of compliance systems and domestic wells are a high priority, but a relatively close behind would be the state smalls, and then our at-risk systems are a little bit lower there. So thank you for completing that. And so let's ask the reporters again if they can share. I know for our group, we jumped around a bit on our questions because there were some interrelated, so it might be a little bit more difficult. So we're going to give David a little bit longer and maybe ask Dawn, would you be willing to start sharing with us?
I would be happy to start. It was a difficult question, and even that poll is difficult. How do you not say everything is a priority? And that's kind of what our conclusion was, although we know that that can't be with limited funding and such. So I think a couple members of our group are really, would like to prioritize more the domestic wells and state small systems. We also had some good discussions about, prioritizing where solutions are ready to go. And then we had a little bit of discussion about equity and fairness and, recognizing if we pull money from one area, if we want to add more to one area, it comes from another. And I don't know that we have a solution there, but acknowledged that as being difficult. So I don't know if that's much of an answer. I think we believe it's all very important.
Oh, it is challenging, and
yeah,
we appreciate that, Dawn. And then how about Sandra, can you tell us some of the key points from your group?
Yeah, it was pretty similar to how it was in Dawn's group. but most of the time, the out of compliance came as a really high priority. And usually in low priority, it was either state smalls or at risk. There was a lot of things where we didn't really see eye to eye on, but almost always it was out of compliance at first or second for highest priority.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And let's see. David, did you want to share for us too, please?
Sure, I'll give it a try here. I think we, had some challenges trying to figure out how to make that balance, because when you look at this, as previous presenters said, you really want to resolve all the problems immediately. And so we looked at this and trying to understand, how do you balance those particular interests, number of people that may be benefited, the time it would take to implement the solution, the length of time that community might have been impacted by water, inadequate water supply, or water supplies that aren't meeting objectives and non-compliant water. What are other sources of funding that might be used to be able to resolve these problems as well? And so what we were wanting to get is a better idea of, I don't think absolute numbers, but sort of relatively, how do we balance that? And if we could look at some other documents that I think the state board's already done, that you could point us to, how has the staff looked at balancing these interests so that we can get a better feeling for how we would balance them. One of the issues in looking at who's currently being impacted, what came up in our discussion was domestic wells, and that there are a lot of domestic wells that we just don't know what their water quality is. So looking at increasing the testing for domestic wells and state smalls, so that we can factor that understanding of what the water quality is for those communities, those users, into the analysis. So I don't know if is there anything that I missed from others who were in our group? But I think that was the basic gist.
Thanks, David. And I think you've all highlighted how challenging of a topic this really is and why it's so difficult. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. We're going to do one more poll based on section 3. And so to recap the questions we asked was based on last year's spend expenditure plan. Are there any solution type categories that need additional funding? And do you agree with the way the list of solution types is currently categorized? So again, we're asking you to tell us what are the solution types that need additional funding. You can select multiple answers on this, so you aren't limited to just one. So the different categories that you can choose from would be interim supplies and emergencies, technical assistance, administrators, planning, direct operations and maintenance, and construction. You can also select none of the above. All right, going to leave it open for a few more seconds. So if you're still thinking, if you could get those answers in. Okay, we'll just end the polling. So it looks like a lot of folks think that we need to put more funding into interim supplies and emergencies. After that, direct operations and maintenance and planning are very similar. About over 60% of people believe that. Construction and technical assistance were next, and then followed up by administrators. So this is just kind of an interesting snapshot of what folks are thinking of where we need additional funding. And it looks like the interim supplies and emergencies is really pretty high on people's list of priorities. So if I could go back to our reporters one more time and ask this time if Sandra, would you begin for us and tell us some of the key takeaway points from your group?
Yes, for our group, it was I think it was fairly like a 50-50 split between prioritizing O&M first or emergency, like interim supplies and emergencies. And then also another thing that was that got brought up quite significantly in our group was a confusion in construction, whereas if there are other parts, other categories here that already include construction. So we just wanted to see like what categories already like, hold on, let me start over. What categories like connect with each other so that we don't necessarily have to add more money into construction. It was just mainly in construction. If there are already other pods that are including construction, so that we can probably just prioritize what types of constructions we need to do and just minimize the funding in construction. I hope that was clear enough. If not, I'll give it another go, or maybe somebody else in my group can go ahead and give it another shot.
I wrote a small summary in the chat for folks if that helps. I thought you did a great job, Sandra.
Thank you. Sandra and Camille, thank you both for that. How about we go and again, my group didn't quite fit to this question the way we had anticipated. So David, did you want to bring up any thoughts that kind of spilled over from the other discussion into this one, since there were some similarities?
No, I was really concerned that I didn't remember talking about this at all. And I was just sitting here stressed out thinking, how did I miss an entire subject? So I was preoccupied with that. I don't really have much to add.
One thing I'd like to point out, and other folks from our group are welcome to mention it, but you know, the discussion that we had was also that it was very challenging to discuss in a very abstract manner these numbers. And that's part of what David had mentioned about looking at different, maybe real world types of numbers and different scenarios that would kind of show those impacts would be helpful. That was something that came out, maybe some sort of a tool that would allow folks to shift and look at these different scenarios to really get a feel for how shifting in one area impacts another area and impacts the number of people or the time. So I think that that's also related to this. Dawn, do you want to finish
Sure.
us up with what your group discussed?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that we specifically said, you know, which should be increased or decreased or anything like that. I think our biggest conversation focused around affordability and recognizing that, you know, there are individuals that have a hard time paying their water bills, and could something be done there that might fall into the emergency category. But that was the basis of our discussion was around affordability issues. And we also brought up sustainability. A couple of us, you know, that doesn't really say necessarily which of these categories, but, you know, ones that would produce sustainable results, I think was an agreed upon concept.
Thanks, Dawn. Well, now that we've shared back on these three different topics, we do want to offer some time for any advisory group member who's interested in reflecting on the discussion or touching on any key points they think we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure that the entire group heard. So to make things a little easier in this virtual setting, if you could raise your Zoom hand, but we're very interested to get any additional feedback. Camille.
Hi, so I just wanted to bring up drought resiliency again. So our group felt that it was really important to start to have a better kind of framework for dealing with disasters going forward, especially when we can see them on the horizon. But we also wanted to clarify that we did not think that funding should come out of the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. We felt like it needed a separate allocation.
Okay, thanks, Camille. Anyone else? All right, well, I think we can give a virtual round of applause for our reporters because it looks like they did a good job covering the information than the share back. So thank you very much for that. So I think next I'm going to pass it over to Adriana to walk us through the public comment section, which is next.
All right, folks, we're going to give a few moments to offer the public an opportunity to join us to share public comments. Right now, we haven't received any, but if those of you who are listening into the webcast would like to submit a public comment, we're going to hold this open. You can email us at safer@waterboards.ca.gov, and we'll send some instructions for how to join the Zoom. So we're going to wait a few moments. And if not, we can transition into our closing.
I think it's also important to note that there is a bit of a lag time between us and the webcast, so we should probably give even more time just in case.
Mm-hmm.
While we wait, can I say something real fast? I wanna say thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak for our communities here in our Central Valley. As a member of our coalition, I think that it's important for us to make sure that we plan something in place for our small water systems that are struggling right now with the operations to be able to provide water to the residents. And I would like to see a little bit of more effort to bring resources to those small water systems, so that way they could continue providing water to the residents without having to raise their water bill for the residents. If I would like to see something like that in place, if there is, or if it's not, it would be something that maybe the State Water Board could plan something, because I'm very sad, because if they raise the water bill for the residents that were struggling before the pandemic, right now with the pandemic, a lot of people are without jobs, and it's very, very sad to see those people that can bring food to their table, and having them thinking of their water bill being raised is very sad, and we should do something as a whole committee, and work with the State Water Board to see how we could assist better those small water systems, and like I said, try to work on something to bring resource to those small communities.
Thanks so much, Lucy. A really important reminder too. Yeah, really great. Thank you for sharing that. Does any other advisory group members, since we're waiting on public comment, does any other advisory group members have any final reflections they want to share before we transition? Sergio, I see
Yes.
you on the screen.
I want to emphasize that one thing that the advisory group is not seeing behind the scenes is the actual process to getting us ready to begin construction, or to actually get a grant approval to start a interim solution, for example. We don't see what's going on behind the scene in the process. There is no metrics right now that is evaluating. Does anybody know how many months or years any of us are working through, the grant process and to get us to the point of beginning construction of that? Nobody is discussing that. Nobody's bringing this to attention because we don't see that. Only people who are into the development and implementation of those projects will be able to share that. That is important. We don't have any idea how long is it taking to deploy those financial resources for the implementation, either to, again, an interim solution or a long-term solution. So in my opinion, we need to discuss that more deeply, because otherwise we won't be able to reflect why is it taking so long to get us from point A to point B, in terms of responding to the needs of those communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sergio. So I hear a request for maybe some more information about our Division of Financial Assistance and sort of the planning process a little bit more. Maybe we could walk through that a little bit more at a future meeting. That's great. Thank you. I see Horacio, and after Horacio, we'll go ahead and transition into our next steps.
Yeah, just to comment about what Sergio said, in our community, it took 5 years just to get clean water and to go through the process. And it was an emergency, but it took us 5 years just to get clean water as an emergency. And for our wastewater, it took 9 years to go through the process of fixing up our wastewater system. And if we didn't have no funds, we could not afford the project, because you have to pay for the expenses that are happening today, and then the money will come later, maybe a year later. And also, just another comment, I think we should pay attention to the homeless. There should be drinking water in every city and close to the homeless populations, because at least the least that we can do is provide clean water for drinking. So just take in consideration that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Horacio. So it sounds like you're also in agreement with Sergio, and I see in the chat, Don White is also in agreement with Sergio, as well as Jonathan Nelson also says it'd be great to have a discussion about the implementation of projects. So thanks for making that request. We could definitely go back together, and as staff, we could think about how we can best share that information at a future meeting for feedback. So we have not received any public comment. As a reminder, folks are welcome to always email the safer@waterboards.ca.gov if there's any comments or questions, and that line is always available. But we're going to be transitioning to the close of our meeting. So I'm going to pass the mic to Jessica, who's going to just walk us through next steps and what to expect for our second meeting.
Great, thanks, Adriana, and thanks to all of our advisory group members for providing that information. So just a few things that we wanted to highlight for you moving forward. Oops, sorry. There we go. We have an upcoming, our Safer Summer series coming up next. So you can see some of the dates listed here. We have our first tribal workshop on June 8th, and we have a variety of different types of meetings and events where folks can join us to participate, learn about SAFER, be engaged in the program. There are going to be some additional dates added soon, so we plan on sending information out. And we're also hoping that our advisory group members can help us to promote this so we can make sure that we're getting out to some of the voices that we don't necessarily always get to hear from. So you'll hear more from us on that very soon. The other thing that we would ask is if our advisory group members would like to have pictures posted online, we'd really like you to have those for people to see who's representing different folks on the advisory group. If you could please send those to us. We do plan on using the Zoom screenshot if we don't get that from you, but we're happy to update those with pictures you would like. The final thing that I'd like to do before we do an official wrap up is to do our evaluation. We have 2 poll questions that we'd like you to answer. So if Ted, if you could, oh, perfect. So first question, which of the following statements do you agree with? And if there is, I understand what the needs assessment is. I felt comfortable participating in this meeting. This meeting was a good use of my time. This meeting shared useful information. The last one is none of these. You can answer multiple choices in this situation. So you can do as many of these as you like. And let's see, leave it open for a few more seconds because we're getting near the end here. Thank you. And then if we could go ahead and launch our final evaluation, where can we make improvements? So if you could tell us, again, multiple choice, presentations by water board staff could use some improvements, meeting logistics in Zoom, communication before the meeting, agenda and the flow of the meeting, meeting materials, or none. Great, seems like we have responses coming in. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds to capture all of our advisory group members' responses. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll now. Thank you so much for participating in that for us. It helps us to make sure we can make these meetings more effective for you. So in closing, because we are running a little bit over time, before we end the meeting, I do want to thank all of the advisory group members and members of the public and staff that have participated and helped us move in the right direction. We're getting SAFER in a really good place. I specifically want to call out the State Water Board SAFER team, DDW, our Division of Drinking Water, excuse me, Division of Financial Assistance, and our Office of Public Participation, and our board members and executive leaders for all the work that they've put into this as well. Looks like, Michael, did you have a question before we wrap things up?
I just had a comment and something to share. Yes. I wanted to thank everybody for today's session. It was very informational. Staff, keep up the good work. We keep moving forward as the goal, right? So one other thing I wanted to say is that if this year completes no more rain after I believe it's April, we're looking into the second decade of a drought, which we haven't seen since 1890. So you get mega drought, and I mean, you get a drought in 10 years, another drought in the other 10, and it just keeps going on and on. It's going to equal a mega drought, and that's what we're heading into. So I'm glad to see that we're going to plan and hopefully get something laid out before we get there. Thank you all.
Thanks, Michael. And with that, let's go ahead and if everyone could unmute themselves, please. And we are going to do our wrap up. At the same time, so if you could repeat after me, water should be safe.
Water
should
be safe.
Water will be safe.
Water will be safe.
Será saludable.
And Adriana, can you help us do this one more time in Spanish, please?
El agua debería ser saludable.
El agua debería ser
saludable.
Saludable.
El agua será saludable.
El
El
agua
agua
será
será saludable.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Bye.
Thank you.
Adiós.